Welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. We got us a little bit of a guest today. We're going to have a little bit of a chat about some things. He's been making some waves on the social media machines, talking about some, let's call them scandals in regards to how much Albertans are paying for electricity and why Albertans are paying so much for electricity. But he's also got a history that goes pretty far back in Alberta politics. We're going to talk about that as well today. All of that being said, very excited to welcome to the show Mr. David Gray. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
I got to say, big fan of Babylon. Um,
I wish I had 1% of the royalties from that.
That's got to be one of the things where you can just kind of like hop on one of the publishing sites and be like, no, it's mine, I swear.
I once got a $20,000 check from SOCAN for David Gray, who was the guitar player in Parachute Club from Toronto. He had scored some TV show or something, and he had a $20,000 SOCAN check, and so I had to send it back. There are more David Grays in the world than there are John Smiths. The Smiths had the good sense to stop calling their sons John.
The Grays do not?
I don't know why David is such a popular name, man. King of the, Israel's. I don't know. Anyway, we do our best, and we're all musical. Every last David Gray in the world is musical.
There we go. So we got to kind of break this up into a few pieces because we got two major topics that I'm hoping that we can talk about today. Let's talk about the one that you've been talking about the most over the last little while, which is I'm just going to say electricity problems. So from a very high level, what is it that your concerns are with electricity in Alberta?
We have a broken electricity wholesale market. In June of 2020, in the midst of all the pandemic nonsense, Sonia Savage directed the Market Surveillance Administrator to let market participants, the generating companies, go ahead and use this maneuver called economic withholding. With that, they've driven up the price by over 100% in 2 years and taken what used to be the price and made that again in profit. So it's really what they've let happen is that a few companies have cornered the market. And the reason that they brought this up as a campaign issue is because they don't understand what they've done.
Okay, well, before we get too far into that, because you used some terms in there, I'm going to have you explain, because I've never heard them before. Why do you know about this? What's your background with the electricity stuffs?
I'm an energy economist and econometrician. I started in the electric utility business in 1989, just as computers were starting to come in. I rose to run the Office of the Utilities Consumer Advocate for the province. Started when Ralph was in office, and I left in 2009. The office is still going, but no one of any use is there. I was in every hearing for every utility and every proceeding around utilities for about a decade. And I'm kind of the Forrest Gump of Alberta energy politics because of that. I have a talent to turn utility jargon into English, sometimes profane English, sometimes appropriately.
All right, so let's turn some of that jargon into English. What is economic withholding?
Economic withholding is a way to hold back generation from the market in order to drive up the price. We first saw this in real life in 2015. It was then that TransCanada held, I think it was 40% of the market in total through these power purchase agreements. And we're able to do this trick whereby pulling 40% of their plants and parking them at $1 a kilowatt hour, effectively taking them out of the market by putting them at the cap, they could make their other plants the ones that set the price. Now, the funny thing about the Alberta electricity market is the price that's paid for everybody is the same price that's paid to the highest guy. So everybody in the market cheers for these big guys to come along and jack up the price. Well, I shame TransCanada out of doing that because it's pretty transparently just usurious. So they stopped, and then soon after that, the prices went down, and the NDP got in, and they gave back the PPAs, and all that sort of stuff wrapped up. Then, when the UCP got in, I don't know whether it was for ignorance, for money, for offerings to the gods. I don't know what gave them the idea that allowing some of the most carnivorous companies on the planet to set the price for people's electricity was a good idea, but that's exactly what they've done. There's two companies that hold the biggest. One is TransAlta, which is the company that got back all those plants that TransCanada was using to do this in 2015. The next biggest one is a new one, which is the one that bought all of ATCO's generating plants. It's Heartland Generation. Then there's the EPCOR generating part, which is Capital Power. And then there's NMAX Generation. So those four companies hold the majority of the power in the market, the majority of offer control, it's called. And so what they've been doing is systematically jacking up the price by, jacking some of their plants into the stratosphere in terms of price, which is the same as taking them offline, right? Which is why it's called economic withholding. If you just took them offline, it would be withholding, but because you're taking them offline by jacking them out of the market, it's called economic withholding. It's the same thievery. Discussion of this topic takes up about 10 very, very dense pages of econobabble every quarter in a report issued by the Market Surveillance Administrator, which is the office that was set up to watch this market and look for shenanigans. Sandra Savage told them to stop looking at economic withholding as shenanigans. It's perfectly fine. And the result is these guys have doubled everybody's electricity rates. They handed them the keys to the Casbah, and they've been having at it. In the old days, I gotta go back. In the old days, because you got me worked up now. I got me worked up. In the old days, when you had these periods when the prices would go through the roof and they'd be bouncing off the cap all the time, you'd call those Ferrari days, right? Because somebody was going to be buying a new Ferrari. People don't understand how financially big the utilities market is, but there's millions and millions of dollars traded every day. There have been Ferrari days for 2 straight years, ever since she told the MSA to let it go. It's insane. It's insanity. And I'm sorry people didn't pick up on this earlier. And I'll be honest, I didn't pick up on this earlier. I had a lot going on in my personal life. And I had stepped away from the industry. So when I came back, my friends like Blake Schaefer at the OC, I said, "Where have you been?" I've been busy. I just got married and stepped away from the industry. And it's crazy. It's absolutely insane. It's the craziest thing I have seen, which includes looking at Ontario, which is insane. Insane. It's the craziest shit I've ever seen in the utility industry across North America.
Can I take a crack at a metaphor to see if I'm understanding this correctly? So, what you kind of described to me, it almost sounds like these electrical companies that you're talking about that do the generation. For the sake of this metaphor, let's say that they're a delivery company, and what they're doing is they're saying to consumers, "Hey, we're going to deliver cheese for you," and they've got a fleet of 10 cheese delivering vehicles. But instead of sending out all 10 vehicles equally, what they're doing, it seems like from what you're describing, is they're sending out one who's doing all the driving and running up the gas bills, and then they're saying, yeah, this is how much it costs to do the deliveries, this is how much gas this guy is using, we're going to have to charge you that for across the board. And never mind the fact that those 9 other vehicles have by and large just been parked and idling. Does that kind of capture the gist of it?
That captures sort of the physical gist of it. The market gist of it is that they're selling gallons of water before you cross the desert. And, the first 5 gallons of water are, let's say, $1 a gallon. But you've got 6 people in your party, you need 6 gallons of water. Are there 6 gallons of water? Sorry, that's $100. And because that one's $100, so are all the rest of them.
Gotcha.
If you had to pay the price of power based on the wholesale market price, the way they jack it around, there would be times when it's $5 an hour to run your house. Like, it's just insane. It is beyond all reason. They've done this to every homeowner, every business owner, every school, every hospital, every building, anything that uses power in Alberta is all getting screwed by these companies to the tune of, well, last year, $16 billion a year.
That's 1.6 billion.
1.6 billion a year and going up. And there's no reason it's going to stop. The only thing that would stop it would be if there was a whole bunch of people came in with new baseload plants. The thing you need to address to get them out of the market is the ability to turn on and off, what's called dispatchability, right? Renewables don't have dispatchability. We have 30,000 megawatts of renewables ready to go, but they wouldn't do anything to affect this problem because you can't turn them on when you need them, right? So it has to be some kind of thermal solution or hydro or battery or something that you can rely on absolutely night and day, all weather, etc. But they have a control over the market such that as much as they could take the price up, they could take it down just as quickly. So nobody's going to build in this market because they know it's run by pirates.
Is there a reason, like if this was triggered off because Sonia Savage said, nah, this economic withholding thing is cool, is there a reason why saying, if Danielle Smith or Rachel Notley, whoever runs the province in 3 weeks, God help us, if the new premier comes in and says, this economical withholding thing, that's not going to work anymore, we got to get rid of it, does that solve the problem?
There are other bigger problems in the market and in the industry overall, but you could cut the electricity price in half with a ministerial order to the market surveillance administrator in an afternoon.
What would that order look like?
It would look like, don't allow these people to offer X amount of percent above their expected price or marginal cost, or however you want to define it. They did it once before already. I'm sure they just need to change the date.
Why do you think they haven't?
Because it's the UCP in power. If it was the NDP in power, the NDP were the ones that stopped it. The UCP were the ones that put it back.
Okay.
So my expectation, Rachel, if you're, hi, or she's so short. I saw her a couple of weeks ago and I've kind of forgotten that she's, fun sized. Anyway, Rachel, if you're listening, you can do this in an afternoon as soon as you're in power.
Okay. What are the implications for Albertans if this doesn't get changed? Like, is this just going to continue escalating?
Yeah. Nobody in the market knows what to do. I was asked a question I hadn't considered it because I hadn't looked at what offers were out there, but why did NMAX stop offering a 3-year product? And the reason is nobody knows what the hell to do. The markets aren't supposed to work like this. This is not an efficient market. It is not a fair market. It is not openly competitive. Those are the only things we judge them on, and it fails on every bloody characteristic. It's a bloody disaster. Like as an economist, as a guy who spent, gosh, I know 5 years of my career dedicated to examining every wrinkle and clause in building an electricity market and talking to some of the best guys in the world who designed electricity markets, I've never seen anything as cockamamie as this. Like, it's just stupid. You don't give someone, a rope to hang with and then let them charge whatever they want to take you off the rope. Right? Like, it really is a life or death commodity. And when I grew up in it, when it was a fully regulated public service, they didn't pull shit like this.
Why do you think? Okay, so here's the question, the obvious question for me. We've seen the UCP over the last 6 months or so go, affordability, it's the worst. Everything's so expensive. If they're the ones that broke this, why isn't it that they just did the ministerial order that you're talking about and fixed it? Like, why go to all of the problems, unless you want to just say that it's crass politics, but why go to all of the problems of saying, hey, we're going to create this giant program to give you all just a little bit of money to try to offset it, and then we're going to talk about affordability a lot, and we're not actually going to do anything to address the underlying issue? Do you think it's really just as basic as crass politics, or do they not know what they've done? Why not just flip the switch and solve the problem?
I don't think you would make electricity affordability the keystone that they blasted out through everybody in their campaign, including the campaign manager, Mr. Outhouse, thinking that it was the worst disaster you had ever created. But it was the worst disaster they've ever created. It's $2 billion a month that's going out the door of every house, every business, every facility in Alberta. They've screwed everybody. And I don't think they know what they've done. I don't think they know what they broke. I don't think they know how the market works. And I don't think they know what things cost. I can't. The reason it took me a few days to respond to them coming out with that announcement was I had to go and do some homework. I hadn't bothered to update my files. I stopped consulting in this a few years back because I don't need to. And it's aggravating, as everybody now knows, because we're dealing with stupid things we've been dealing with for 20 years now, or 30 years. But I just don't think they get it. I don't think they have anybody on staff that gets it. If they've had warnings, they've ignored them. And so I think they walked into a wood chipper thinking that they were just doing great. Oh, did we accidentally cause the electricity price to double over the last 2 years? Oops. Anyone with any knowledge would know what would happen. And I can guarantee you, the guys that were pushing her to open it up on the industry side knew exactly what they had in mind and exactly how they're going to take it to grandma. Because that's really what it's come down to. And this, carnivorous, pirate-led market is of the attitude, well, if grandma can't pay, grandma can't die. That's the ultimate libertarian ethos, isn't it? No wonder Danielle likes it.
Well, let's talk, because you go back a little bit with Miss Smith, because you were involved.
2004.
There we go. So let's talk about how you got involved in politics, sir.
I got involved in politics when I came back to Alberta, because in my industry, everything is political. And moving into Alberta, it was pretty clear it was more of a one-party economy than Soviet Russia ever hoped to be. So I got involved in conservative politics. I said that kind of crassly. My family had some history in politics. My uncle was quite a popular MLA in Manitoba. My dad had been a reeve on council. I'd been on town council when I was in the Northwest Territory. So it's not like I was politically naive, but I really got involved in politics when I came back to Alberta. The first campaigns I got involved with was Joe Clark's, oddly enough. But then involved in provincial politics and with Klein. And, I'll let you know, I was a free market economist in the 80s. So it was, all Michael Smith's character. Or no, Michael Smith's, Michael J. Fox. He played the rich kid.
Yep. Family ties.
I won't remember, waste time remembering something that's not important to this story, but I was one of those guys. I was a conservative. I was a natural progressive conservative. I believe in a strong economy. I still do. If you want to have all these nice things in public services, you need to make a lot of money, right? You need a good, strong business sector. You want that. It's stupid not to. But you have to understand that markets don't do morals. And this is a perfect example.
So you came back to Alberta, you have the political background, you take a look at the landscape, you go, oh, if I want to play, I'm going to have to play in the politics.
It worked. I got selected out of working at the Energy and Utilities Board as an analyst to head up the regulatory department for the newly founded Office of the Utilities Consumer Advocate. When I was hire number 6, I was the only guy who knew anything about utilities at all, including the advocate, who was a deputy minister who'd been shuffled for, let's call it, domestic reasons. So he left after a while, and I ended up running the whole show. And through that job, I was involved in everything important from 2004 through 2009, which is when most of this stuff went down. And I was on speed dial for everybody because I could give them a short, straight answer as to what was going on with anything utility related.
So at some point, you jumped from the PCs to the Wild Rose, though.
So we get to Stelmach. Everything was going great for me personally, which I'm going to admit, I'm making some atonement for the part I played in what is going on. I was Klein's hitman for some unruly consumer side representatives. One guy in particular, a guy named Henry Unruh, had taken over $1 million out of the system representing irrigation customers. So he was the poster child for bad interveners, and it was my job to get rid of bad interveners, which I did. They then got rid of all intervention, which I didn't count on. My intention was this thing would be set up to be a proper professional consumer representing intervention outfit equal to what the utilities had, because I felt that was, and still do, that's probably the best model for getting good results out of utilities. So I was the last guy fired out of about half a dozen. First guy fired was a guy named Kellen Flukiger, who was running electricity policy for the department. He would tell Minister Mel Knight when he was full of shit, and that was pretty much daily towards the end. The president and the 2 top vice presidents of the ISO were let go. And then I was the last one. I kind of hung on like a tick. And that was fine. It's politics. I'm a big boy. I was ready to walk away. I'd spent a bunch of time renovating my house. And then they fired my second in command on the regulatory side because he was a friend of mine, for no other reason than he was a friend of mine. He's a very qualified guy, should have been there representing the public. And that pissed me off. So I got on the newspaper front cover, top fold for about a month, telling electricity stories to my old beer church buddy, Darcy Henton. So at this point, I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder with regards to the progressive conservatives, and they were acting terribly, and they were awful. And they had the problem, several times consecutively, that they get the bottom of the barrel for their premiership picks Sorry. And then also get the bottom of the barrel for cabinet, right? So they had terrible cabinet ministers through Stelmach and then Redford. So I thought they needed to go. So I knew Danielle because she was on my board of directors for the Utilities Consumer Advocate, representing the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Well, this was before she was completely wackadoodle. Um, and when I finished with, excoriating Stelmach and Company, we reached out and were in contact, and I helped her with her first leadership campaign, the Wild Rose. I wrote her a song and all sorts of stuff. Helped her with electricity policy. So I was there with Wild Rose right up until the big crossing in 2015, as the expert on electricity policy and whatnot. And I'd been asked to join the executive in that last meeting. And so I was there that last Sunday after the convention when everybody was depressed because Savage and one of the person had already crossed over to the Tories, and didn't find out until later that that was the day that Saskew and Anderson pigeonholed her in an office and told her, you're either coming with us or we're going around you. And that's the day that she got pulled into that floor crossing. Now, she got treated like dirt right after that, right? They made her run for nomination. She didn't get nominated in a riding. So she was back to a restaurant or whatever she was doing before she went back on radio. Um, and to think that she's now come back to be given a second opportunity to destroy the privileged Conservative Party, just it gives me fits of giggles. It honestly does.
What was your role when all of that was happening? So when the floor crossing happened, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. There were a couple of MLAs that crossed, and then there's a clip that's been making the rounds lately where Smith was overtly asked, "Is there going to be any more floor crossings?" And she was like, "Absolutely not." And then a couple of days later, there absolutely were. She was part of it. But what was your role at that time?
Oh, I was on the executive. I had a ringside seat. I wasn't involved in any of the scheming or plotting and any of that stuff. I was just there trying to build a better Alberta. At that point in time, the NDP still really weren't a business party well suited to my interests and background, but they've come further to the right, and I've probably come a little further to the left as I've become a grandpa. I or maybe I already was. I don't know. The way that Alberta utility customers have gotten screwed in this province has always just irked me because they don't know the half of it. Well, now they can see the half of it. Take half of the power charges on your bill, and that's what's going to the companies in the electricity market who are screwing you blind.
What could be done?
Um, a lot of things more than the simple solution need to be done, but there's a simple solution to stop that particular problem, which is just ban it. Right? Just say you cannot put in offers that are that far afield from your cost without it being an actual shortage, right? If you could only drive those prices up if it was a physical shortage, it wouldn't be a problem. But because they can do this with market power, artificially, financially, it's a big problem.
Why do you think more people aren't talking about this? I mean, like it is a fairly abstract, complicated. I mean, when you boil it down to they're doubling the price because they can. That's easy to understand, but the how of it, I think, is so technical that it's challenging for somebody who doesn't have a background in energy or economics to really fully grasp. Why is it? Do you think that more people aren't talking about this issue though?
Several studies have actually come out. If you actually look a year ago, Blake Schaefer and his group at the U of C Policy School did an extensive paper on this, and it showed at that time, I mean, it was half of what it was in 22, but even in 21, you could see that the biggest part of the increase in the price was from this market power abuse. It was very clear, but they put it in polite technical language. I didn't. Somebody asked me that today, using all this bad language, it's like you're the other side. You're doing something like the other side. Well, yeah, I'm playing information warfare games like they do because I've learned from watching the mistakes of the UCP war room. Um, every detail of this was known a year ago. The reason that people are talking about it now is because I started swearing about it. And rightly, I should. I should be right now. I am showing restraint like you cannot imagine.
Why aren't the NDP talking about it? Because it seems to me like the UCP broke it. The UCP won't fix it.
It's a very difficult topic most of the time to get across. The reason people don't touch this is because a millimeter beneath the surface of what I've just said is this kaleidoscope of complication in every field that you can imagine. Like utilities have their own accounting, they have their own law, they have their own engineering standards, they have their own electrical standards. Everything is specialized. And unless you're a guy like me, which is weird, who has been on every side of the table from the company to the consumer to the regulator, and sat in conversations with accountants and lawyers and engineers and just sat there like a sponge absorbing this stuff for 30 years, it's very difficult to get it. Right? It's taken me a long time to get it to the point where I can say, here's your problem and this is what it's costing you. Well, there's the problem. What it cost in 2021 was $8 billion. What it cost in 2022 was $16 billion. And there's no reason to think it just won't keep climbing. There's nothing to stop it.
Let's try a little bit of an experiment then. If you were to say to any political party that wasn't the UCP, because if we go with the idea that the UCP are the ones who broke it, they're not going to be the ones to fix it, how would you say a political party should present this topic to the general public?
You can't.
Well,
I've tried. I can tell you can't. It is the problem is with all of these parties, organizations, anyone, the gatekeeper between the public and the expert is the communication guy. The communication guy will tell you, well, that's too complicated. I can't get that across. You can never get it across because they're not smart enough to get it. I'm sorry, but there are some things that not everybody's going to get. I don't expect to understand all the details of pediatric cardiology, right? Not everybody's going to get every wrinkle of electric utilities. And I mean, they think they do. And then they come on my Twitter page and I have to educate them. It's not always pretty.
that's fair. So if a political party can't communicate this to the voter, to the public, how I guess one of the things that we're bumping up against here is that there is, and this has been an ongoing theme in our show for a little while now, there's this whole resistance to expertise. There's this whole, people call it the death of expertise, where I don't want to, you're not better than me, you're not smarter than me, and that's sort of the whole approach that a lot of people are taking. And politicians seem to be very afraid to say, you know what, there are experts and we should be listening to the experts. And if the experts say we got a problem here, like one of the vehicles that I drive, it's all computerized and junk. And if I have problems with it, I go, shit, I guess I'm taking this to a mechanic because there's stuff that I don't understand. it seems like there should be part of the conversation that includes the idea of, if the economy is having problems, we should take it to an economist and see what the economists say. And if it's in a specialized market like the energy market, maybe we should take it to somebody who's specialized in that and see what they say. And if they say, oh, well, here's your problem, somebody stole your catalytic converter, then we need to do what they say. So maybe let me rephrase my question. How do you think we get political parties to listen to experts like yourself?
I think you need political parties to be made of experts in many areas. I think we need to get back to the model where good, civic minded, knowledgeable people from the community step forward to put their names as representatives for their communities and bring their knowledge to the table. Electricity is a weird one. It's unnecessarily complicated. It's filled with too many people who make good money off of those complications. The way I would approach electricity as a political party is to just state, these are our goals. We want to assume or provide low cost, stable price energy for consumers in a way that they can afford, right? We want to provide them with opportunities to do the right thing that are easy and affordable. We want to make sure that none of the things on the electricity market that benefit the big customers, the optionality and trading that you get with the electricity market, have a negative impact on the small customers. Because this entire fiasco was done to satisfy the interests of the big industrial customers in Alberta. They've benefited tremendously from it. Honestly, they should just step the hell back and say, yeah, protect the small guys, protect the regular consumers buying electricity and, behind the regular meter. We can look after ourselves, protect them. It's the stupidest thing they ever did, was trying to apply the philosophy that works for a sophisticated industrial sized player in a minute to minute, second to second electricity market. And, Martha and John at home trying to figure out why their bill's gone past $300.
Is there a missed opportunity in this? Because I'm just looking at some of the numbers that you were throwing down. 8 billion in 2020, I think it was, 16 billion the year after. I can't help but find myself thinking about the very bad PR exercise that Mr. Brian Jean and Rebecca Schultz recently conducted, where they said, oh, the net zero thing, in order to net zero, it's going to cost so much money. We'll do it, but I'm not going to tell you how we're going to do it. And a lot of people said that's not how any of this works. But if we're talking about the cost of going net zero, if we're talking about the costs of improving the electrical system in the grid, we're talking about $24 billion in gross profits that didn't do those things. Is that part of the conversation that we should be having, or am I reading this wrong?
$24 billion that came out of the pockets of big and large electrical consumers in Alberta from 21 and 22 that went into thin air, that went into the pockets of the shareholders of those companies. It evaporated, it disappeared from our GDP, never to be seen again, offshore to America. It's the worst possible outcome to allow an oligopoly to extort economic rent from the backsides of your captive utility customers. See, you can see me hesitating there, right? I'm really doing my best, man. I'm so mad at these guys. I honestly, like I say, I stepped away from it. I've been renovating a house. I've been the electricity industry has been the furthest thing from my mind for a couple of years until I start taking a look at what's going on. And oh my God, I cannot believe the travesty, just the absolute travesty of letting the market get to the point where if they hadn't stepped in, like if they hadn't put in this 13-cent BS cap that they're just rolling over till the price goes down, It would have been 32 cents a kilowatt hour for the regulated rate. 32, like Draisaitl's goals in the playoffs, like 32, 32 cents a kilowatt hour when it should be 6, right? Like it's nuts. People are looking at their bills and they see the thing. Oh, Rachel Notley's going to make electricity more expensive. Well, how much more expensive can she make it? Like, no wonder they're mad at her.
Is there, I guess the question that I'm trying to ask is what you're describing and the numbers you're using, as much as it seems like the UCP are saying there's absolutely no capacity to go to net zero, it's going to cost so much. I'm looking at $24 billion that says different.
Yeah. Yeah. You can knock that right off the top. The rest of it was BS anyway. So they took an inflated estimate because I don't know, for some reason, we got this thing in Alberta that if it's not oil and gas, it's enemy, right? So we've got this whole green power, man. Green power is going to make us all die. We're going to turn all the frogs gay, man. We're going to be eating bugs, man. It's none of that. If you go to Texas, the first major metropolitan area in North America that's going to be 100% renewable powered is Dallas, Fort Worth. There are 4 registered environmentalists in Dallas, Fort Worth, right? There is no war between green energy and oil in Texas. They all get on like a house on fire. It's energy. We know energy. Let's sell energy. Like the biggest single travesty in this entire thing is the amount of money we're leaving on the table and a potential new export opportunity to sell green energy to all these, American pickup trucks. Like it's insane. It drives me insane that because of this racism against the green in Alberta, that we can't take advantage of having 30,000 megawatts of green energy already in queue. We don't even have to go looking for it. Those are projects that are already lined up, ready to go. We just need to figure out how to, create an export company or something to tie us to America. Anyway, I digress, as I'm apt to do, because I've been holding a lot of this stuff inside for too long. I honestly can't believe for the life of me 2 things: that they would be so dumb as to give these companies unfettered ability to corner the market, unfettered ability, like no limits, and then run on that. The 2 things put together, there should be a paper written on this as to some lower subcategory of Dunning-Kruger, because it's the stupidest thing politically that I've ever bloody seen. I sometimes put the little sideways laughing emoji in my tweets, right? It's like, hold on, sideways laughing. I am literally holding my sides laughing, thinking about how stupid it is that they're bringing attention to what's the worst thing that I've ever seen in Alberta utilities. I mean, this is worse than when they opened the market. The prices didn't get this high when they opened the market in a shortage, to put things in perspective.
Well, I mean, I can't help but think, and it gets really technical really quick, and I don't pretend to understand it particularly well, but I remember in 2018, 2019, there was a essentially independent, he was affiliated with the party, but Mr. Greg Clark was doing everything that he could to start talking about the balancing pool, and the numbers that he was talking about was it cost Albertans $2 billion. And that's not 24.
So I know that one very intimately. I'm actually part of that story, the whole Forrest Gump thing.
Yeah.
So when that came out in 2015, I got a call from a reporter because he had figured out that Rob Hemstock from NMAX had worked for Enron, right? Enron. And he concocted this whole story because of the way the comments rolled in on this one clause of the power purchase agreements that the Utilities Commission was working on, that there was this conspiracy between the regulator and Enron, and it was all, it's all, they made it all up, man. I mean, they snuck it in there and to screw the ratepayer, because this was when all the utility companies were trying to get out of these PPAs because they had brought in the carbon tax. And they were using this clause that had this one phrase in it of it, the clause is triggered if you're losing or losing more. So Hemstock put in if you're losing more, right? So the clause originally was you can get out of this if they change the legislation and you're losing money. And he said, if you're losing money or you're losing more money, right? So if it's going down, you can get out. I was there. I was in that hearing. I was one of the top guys on it. So I know all that stuff into me. I know Rob Hemstock intimately. It was no such thing. I told him it was no such thing. I told him it was a foolish idea. But the next thing I know, they're running with the foolish idea and concocting this thing and doing their lawsuits and all this bullshit. And so I wasn't at all surprised when it all went boom. And when I saw Rachel, I did tell her I thought that was a terrible idea, and don't do that again. Ask some people first. But yeah, it was a $2 billion cock up, sort of. I mean, what would have happened is the companies would have had to suck up that $2 billion, right? So the ratepayers sucked it up instead of the companies. But that's usually the way these things work anyway. And in all the rest of utility regulation, that's the way they work. Anyway, back to the story. So I get this call, they do this stupid thing, I get it back. I can't believe that they do this. So I write this long article because what they had done was to impugn Neil McCrank, who was one of the better chairman of the Energy and Utilities Board, one of the better public-minded regulators that I'd ever run into. So it ticked me off, and I wrote an article rebutting them. And, it's one of those things that people who don't understand the industry really should be very cautious about poking at before they do things.
Okay.
What can I say? It's complicated. It's always the third rail of politics.
Well, Greg Clark tried to explain it to me a couple of times, and I'm pretty sure I just stared at him like a dog just shown a card trick because it was so far over my head. But I was like, okay, but it costs $2 billion, right? Like that's the end of the.
It's cost $2 billion. You know what it is on your bill? So I looked at a sample bill from a lady with a regular house in Edmonton who's on the RRO. That particular charge is called the balancing pool allocation fee. It was $2.03. That's what $2 billion looks like in the utility industry. Just to put things in perspective, that's $2 billion in the utility industry. That kind of charge every month for 10 years, yeah, something like that. The utility industry is the world's biggest rent-to-own scam, just to put it in perspective.
Here's a question that I have for you. And I don't want to, I'm not going to try to corner you into nothing, but looking at the lay of the land, what would you say to voters who are maybe going, oh, $24 billion, that doesn't sound good? What would you say to voters as they're trying to figure out how to proceed in the upcoming, I mean, we're kind of in it, the election? What are the things that you want people to be thinking about when it comes to energy? What are the questions that you think people should be asking candidates? What advice, if any, would you give them?
The question for candidates is, why have my power bills risen so much in the last 2 years? And is it this economic withholding thing that this guy Dave says it is? In broader terms, I can tell you the thing that I am missing from olden days is a public-minded spirit. Politics, when it's used to divide, is cheap. It's easy to do. I can divide a room throwing 5 words out. It's easy. There's nothing to it. It's not hard to do at all. What's hard to do is to open your ears long enough to listen to what the other side has to say, understand if there's some point that they're making that you can agree with, and see if you can find a way to make things better for the people who aren't there at the table, who aren't making the decision and have no power in what is going to happen to them. I really can't stress enough that in my many years in the utility industry, where you're looking at the public interest, that's your focus. We are doing this in the public interest. It is written down and very explicit that that's how you're supposed to look at things. I would have never considered a system that would leave so many people scrambling to cover their power bills. Never considered it. In the olden days, this is what would be called rate shock. And the regulator would send you back to your room with no rate increase. And you would think about what you did wrong until the next year when you could apply again. Right? There's a lot of cheapness in politics that needs to go. And I hope we find a way out of it. The pessimistic economic side of me, because what you do as an economist is just study human nature, measured in dollars usually, or other quantities. We need to find a way to recognize each other, understand that we can all do better together, and that it's more important sometimes to be satisfied than it is to be rich, right? If we had a bunch of people coming into the legislature with that kind of philosophy, I'd be a lot happier.
I think a lot of people would, certainly with their electricity bills from what you're describing.
Yeah. The only thing in life is humans. The only thing that's important are other people. Everything else is just furniture.
I got to ask, as somebody who, I'll say worked with cautiously, Danielle Smith, what's going on with her these days? Like, we had a conversation with Thomas Lukasik, and he was like, oh no, this is how it's always been. It's just never been this highlighted. Do you hold the same view as the Danielle Smith, the instability, the erraticness, the wild comments? Is this just Danny being Danny, or is this not the person that you knew? I'm legitimately curious about that.
I don't. She's always had an ego above her intellect. She's not the dumbest person in the world, but she's certainly not the smartest. So, to give you a notion, and maybe my stuff is a bad example because this electricity stuff gets infinitely complicated for everyone. It's designed that way. It's a lot of people making $250 an hour because it's complicated. But even on other things, like she tended to put on ideas, like she was trying on outfits, right? Well, maybe we should make it so you have to pay everything, or maybe we should make sure you have to pay nothing, right? Like, I don't think there's a deep abiding moral philosophy underneath the attention seeking. And more, that's what I see is it's attention seeking. It's not, it's not a new philosopher coming out. People don't understand, like it's a liberated joy to not have a paycheck beholden to any of those assholes, to be out of the system where I can't speak the truth, and to be able to do the thing I love, which is music. So I'm in a very, very happy place.
I want to give you a chance to talk about the music just before I let you go. So what's the deal with the music, he said?
I have been playing guitar since I was about 3 years old. Somebody asked me why I didn't take up music as a career. And the answer is pretty simple. I didn't want to ever take an oath of poverty.
It's true though.
It's, like doing what I did, I could make, $300, $400, $500 an hour, right? It's, I happen to get into a particular niche of very specialized crap, as you can probably tell. And it, like a lot of niches of very specialized crap, for a while, it can be very lucrative. And then, it wears on you.
Music is for most people not that lucrative. I remember back in my day, I got paid in hot dogs once. That was a big night.
I was
What kind
always
of
pretty
music do you?
lucky. Every band I was in was pretty popular. So, I mean, I was used to making $500 a night as a musician, plus comped. And so, yeah, it's sort of nice. I've always been able to get into it at kind of a pretty high level, and like my friend Miles Wilkinson that I was just talking about. People don't know about him, but he's a producer for the last 5 Guy Clark records, right? All the ones that people rave about. Yeah, that's my friend Miles. People don't know the kind of talent that's in Edmonton because they don't get out enough. They should really support their local artists more, and the global artists less. But it's always been the case. And who are we to complain about it? We'll just go back to house painting like every other musician.
What kind of music do you play?
I'm sort of in, commercial pop, rock, country, love song. It depends what mood strikes me. I go from kind of more rockabilly to some stuff that's pretty folky country. I mean, I grew up on the farm, love country music, love rock music. Led Zeppelin and Dwight Yoakam are both, in the turntables. So I do what I do, and I do other things to pay for it.
That's awesome. I got to say, I have been recently rediscovering some of the music coming out of Edmonton. There's a group called, I want to say it's the Scenic Route to Alaska, and holy hell,
Oh yeah.
how did I miss that for as long as I did? Um,
I have another band called the Dirty Dirty Devils. Unfortunately, it's come to its end because our drummer Doug unfortunately blew his rotator cuff. So he's down to one band on his rotator cuff and he can't drum anymore. So unfortunately, I've had to park that particular project. But we've got a few tunes from that band up online too, if you want to listen to some of the more rock and rockabilly side. But yeah, it's a joy. I love music. I love art. It's how we communicate being human to other human beings. I find that's my focus more and more as I get older and have stopped worrying about competing with other people and, the rat race and all the 48 laws of power crap that you have to deal with to be a monkey that rises up the food chain in this great ape society of ours. That those things aren't as important as people vote them to be. And that if you step back and build a better community, you'd actually find your economy would probably do better because of that, not in spite of it. I always put it this way, if you want to live in a better neighborhood, you can buy a more expensive house, or you can just help fix up your neighborhood.
That's an excellent note to leave things on, I think. Mr. Gray, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. I'm going to give you one more opportunity. Any other thoughts that you want to share? Any other final words you want to throw out there?
My opinion, because I was asked it, if I was voting strictly on electricity, I'd obviously go with Notley. They've already stopped this problem once. It would be no problem for them to stop it again.
All right, there we go. Thank you again.
And to my friends in the industry, I see you. I see what you're doing. You're not going to get away with it.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks for having me.
As always, if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here at The Breakdown, we would love it if you swung by our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab and signed up for a small monthly sponsorship of the work that we're trying to do here. It is because of the support that we receive from our Patreon sponsors that we're able to continually up our game, and it is tremendously appreciated. So I want to throw a big thank you out to them, and you can go ahead and visit that website and join and support us as well, because we need all the help we can get. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much for listening and being part of these important conversations. And we will see you next time on The Breakdown.